Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today.
We've got an eclectic mix of topics and guests tonight, a little of this and a little of that, and it should be fun. Prolific researcher and writer Cheryl Costa returns to share news about an amazingly ambitious project that she has unleashed. As some of you might remember, Cheryl and her spouse Linda are preeminent UFO statisticians. They've compiled the most comprehensive pile of hard data on UFO cases, sightings, incidents, breaking it all down by state, by county, by city, as well as into categories, shapes, sizes, time of day, all that kind of stuff. A bonanza of objective info on this strange subject, and now she's divvied it up into a series of books, one for each state in the country, so you can get info about UFOs that's darn near personalized. I mean, it's a good tool for local journalists or researchers who might want to jump into the subject. How and why did she crank out all of this work? All right, here we go. If you're into UFOs, truly into the subject, and are serious about wanting to understand the phenomena, hoping for more info, solid info, but you don't want to wait for the government to open up the vaults, as if that's ever going to happen, then this is for you. Cheryl Costa was named UFO Investigator of the Year back in 2018 at the International UFO Congress, and for very good reason. She and her partner, Linda, put together this humongous pile of UFO facts and figures, the ultimate desk reference for serious investigators and students of ufology. And it was minus many of the nasty catfights that typically characterize the subject all too often. Now, those two have taken a huge leap forward with a project that is astonishing in its scope. They've written books, UFO books, for each state, filled with very specific data for each of the 50 states, broken down into all kinds of categories. The first 25 of those books are already out, and I think Cheryl has said that there are 5 more coming every week until they get the whole 50 done. And Cheryl served in both the Air Force and Navy, worked in the defense industry as an information security professional, worked as a newspaper columnist as well with a wildly popular UFO column back in New York State, and she's also a playwright to boot. She joins us now to talk about how and why she put together this massive, still unfolding book series. Cheryl, welcome back.
Hi, George. Nice to see you.
There's a masochist lurking in there somewhere for you to take on something this monumental. I mean, 50 books, one for each state, each one chock full of really fascinating numbers that help us understand this. What was going on? What's the inspiration for it?
The inspiration was when we wrote our UFO sightings desk reference. The best we could do was put all 50 states in there and take them down to about the county level. And we kept having people write us and say, I want to know about my regional area. Okay? And that was a big driver. The other thing, too, was we had the desk references were not exactly cheap. They were upwards of like $40. And what we wanted to do was come out with a very affordable book that could literally go down to the county, zip code, and hamlet level and give you, we don't give you the sighting data beyond how many you had. So you get a thing where you get down to your particular hamlet, and if there were sightings there from any of the shapes, it lists out exactly what shapes, and across over 20 years going across the page, you'll see exactly what those volumes are for both your state and your local area.
Yeah, I could see, people that are just starting into it, maybe even journalists. I thought when the desk reference came out, it would be a great resource for journalists who are thinking about getting into the subject and want to understand it for their area. But people who are living in Florida maybe don't want a gigantic book that tells them about UFO sightings in some county in Wyoming. This makes sense, though. And I guess, how's it going so far? Is it catching on?
Actually, every time we get a visibility like some on either a major podcast, or we had a nice article done by the Detroit Free Press last week, and the Michigan books went through the roof. So as the word's getting out there, people are jumping on it, and we've been getting a lot of visibility on Twitter, which has been very good for us as well.
Excellent. So
the goofy thing about this, though, is that people said, well, why didn't you just print one big book? And it would have been, we figured it out back in 2020, it'd be about 6,500 pages. It would have been 1.5 feet thick. So the idea was, let's break it down to the individual states. And even Linda, right up until about 8 months ago, thought this was an impossible venture. And I applied. I think my late methods engineering professor from college would be very proud of this project, because I came up with a modular way of building these things, and this has made this possible to dump these out at about 5 a week.
You know, there's a guest, a friend of mine named Nick Redfern, who comes on the show a couple times a year because he puts out like 4 books a year. You've blown that away. I mean, 5 books a week is what the schedule is. How many? Where are you now? How many are out, and how many are still to go?
As the other day, it was we had when we dropped to a note, we had 25 of the states out. Linda put 5 more up there today. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, and right now, unless there's some kind of catastrophe, we expect to have all of them out by no later than the second week of January, probably about the first week of January.
Wow. I know one of the first editions you put out was for Nevada, and I sure appreciate that, but so much of what's in each volume applies to the big picture, the rest of the country as well, as you note in a couple of places. So it's, it's not for everyone. Not everyone is happy about mere statistics and facts. Big surprise, right? UFO people upset about something. Can you tell me which states you chose to go with first and why?
Okay, well, it was a technical problem to begin with. The issue was the size of the covers, okay, page counts. When you printed it, we would have a certain amount of matter in there that is the typical stuff you have to have in the front of the book. And then there was also all the essays that we wrote about our research work. And then a printout, literally down to the village level for every state. Now, some states like North Dakota or something like that, which is kind of at the bottom of the list for sightings, had maybe 14, 15 pages. You get a state like California, and it's like over 300. And anywhere in between. And so the cover size was an issue. And we originally ranked them based on how big the printout for their state would be. And then we decided to go with Amazon. Instead of designing a separate cover for every state manually, we decided to just go with the automatic covers that they have on Amazon, but we color-coded them. There are 4 census regions. There's the Northeast, there's the South, there's the Midwest, and the Western census region. So we color-coded the covers based on the states in each of those census regions.
There's a statement early on in the book where you reference that the numbers exist on their own. I mean, they're separate from one's beliefs. That's a tough thing to do in the UFO world, as you know. Yes,
very much so. It's funny because when we were working on the desk reference before the last desk reference before this one, we kept going over to this our local print shop. It was like, I think it's Staples, and the guy kept saying, did you take out all kooks, nuts, and crackpots? And I said, how would we do that? We can't vet 167,632 in our lifespan. So we went with the idea of we have a way of estimating based on percentages of what might be real, what might not be. And the numbers are pretty consistent. We've been hearing people at the Congress saying, 70 or 80% might be misidentified and all that kind of thing. And then it gets down to some smaller things that they say they're interested in. And we've run 2 sets of numbers, one around 30%. What does that look like? One at 1%. What does that look like? And my favorite is 5% because that's what feels good to me as to what's really going on. I'll give you an example. 5% of the sightings would work out to about 8,382 for 20 years, and that would be about 35 a month for 240 months for 20 years, and about 8 a week, and about 1 a day. And that's what feels good to me.
And what does that tell us? I mean, does that tell us that this is not just something that only pops up once in a while? Even at those numbers, we exclude almost all the cases, right?
Yeah, that's true. But you got to look at it. In the United States, the last 20 years, on an average, we average about 8,400 a year, about 700 a month, about 160 a week, and an average of about, it spikes now and then, but basically about 23 a day. So for the people who think these things are exceedingly rare, no, we get about 23 a day reports in the United States, and there are many times that there are spikes all the time. And so there's a lot of activity out there being reported, and we determined that only 1 in 257 people reports what they see.
Right.
And
That's right.
That was based on a couple of polls that said something like 16.74% of the country of adults say they've seen a UFO. Well, that cranks out, using 2010 census data, that cranks up to about 43 million people. And so when you start putting it against 167,000 reported sightings, the percentage of people who actually reported what they saw is much smaller.
Yeah, just think of those numbers, what they must be. I remember 30 years ago, the essential conclusion of ufologists and UFO groups at the time was 90% of 9 out of every 10 sightings are probably explainable as prosaic objects or phenomena, but it's also true that 9 out of 10 are not reported at all. So the real numbers could be gigantic.
Very true, very true. One of the things we looked at was the idea of we've cranked these numbers a bunch of different ways to see how this works. We tried the old 1 in 10 type of thing that used to be talked about. 1 in 10 people sees something, and only 1 in 10 of them reports it. Okay, and we've run the numbers, and it doesn't work. But when we started putting that polling data in there, it started looking much more reasonable. And then when we put in this factor that we figured out was 1 in 150, 157, something like that, and the numbers sync right in with what's been reported. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there, but a lot of people are not reporting it. And it's frustrating because we would like to have more data. But, we also found out that there was a lot of people who would go, well, I'm not going to report it to those national centers, or they didn't know that, like, MUFON or New Fork existed.
Cheryl Costa, can you explain to us where the raw numbers came from, what databases you put together to come up with the info that's in the book series?
Sure. We downloaded the information from the National UFO Reporting Center, which accounts for about 60% of the data. And then the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, was kind enough to support us with a dump of the period of time that we're dealing with, again, 2001 through 2020. And we brought that down. And amazingly enough, a lot of people think we've got all the information in there. And the only thing we kept was what, when, where, what state, what dates, and what shape, that type of thing. We just kept the raw data. We didn't keep the stories or anything like that.
Right. I know there's a couple of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, that's it.
There is some feedback that you've got from angry ufologists. Hard to believe that such things exist, right? Angry ufologists who gripe about something, but you received feedback from them like, what are you doing to weed out things that are explainable? So what do you do to sort of establish these are genuine UFOs that are left in your figures?
We did this percentage thing. We had a kind of a rule. Dr. Valet said 80% was noise. MUFON investigators typically told us 70% was noise, that type of thing. So we basically said, when people ask us if you had to eliminate some, what would you do? And I'd say, okay, if you want to go on that standard, we'll say 30% is probably the good stuff. Now, and most people are good with that because it's still a huge number. I mean, we're talking 30% still amounts to 50,200 for a 20-year period, about 2,500 a year, about 210 a month, every month for 240 months, and about 4 a week. Okay, and so this is the deal, but that wasn't good enough for some people. Some people said, "Oh, Cheryl, they've got to be rarer than that." I said, "Well, how about we throw 99% away and say just keep 1%?" And that's where we came up with that number of 1,676 for average. Actually, for 20 years, 84 a year and 7 per month. But if that's 1%, that's 7 per month for 240 months. I always qualify that. Those are the real starships visiting the United States every month.
So, if people would say, well, what's the value of this? If, you've got a UFO from 2002 that appeared over Clark County, Nevada, you don't do any case studies. You're not digging into specifics that would say yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs down about that that individual case, right?
Right. Well, when Linda and I started out with this, we actually decided to do this stuff back in October of 2015. And one of the big complaints both of us had, and I was still writing my newspaper column at the time, was that everything in UFOlogy had been dominated by case studies, okay? And think of case studies as autopsies, okay, like you see on CSI, okay? And Linda came from the Environmental Protection Agency. She's a scientist and worked for them. And she said, we use disease models. So we said, instead of looking at one ant and trying to make a call on this, let's look at the entire anthill. And that was the approach we took. And all we ever set out to do, we weren't out to prove that any one of them is real. We wanted to measure the scale of the phenomena, and that was the objective from the beginning, measure the scale of the phenomena and learn as much as we could about the sightings, where they are, what drives them, what influences them, that type of thing.
Yeah. There's a line early in the book in the foreword: no solitary UFO case exists in a vacuum, and there's a mention of the context allows the reader to view a UFO sighting as a single thread woven into the fabric of UFO history. That's a pretty cool goal.
Yeah, it is. And another thing people miss on this stuff is there's been a lot of myth out there. They're all around the big cities. You go to a big city, it's more eyes on the sky. People make all these leaps on it. And while it looks that way when you first look at the numbers, the real truth of the matter is most of the sightings occur in the suburbs, the bedroom communities, the unincorporated further communities further out, and the rural communities further out, within a particular county. That's where the majority, 75% of the sightings are reported. And that's what throws people. And basically, when people ask me questions all the time on this stuff, I'll say, well, okay, to that question, the data doesn't support it. And it scares them when you tell them, the data doesn't support their belief or their judgment call based on what they think these things are doing. And, we can't. One of the big questions I get all the time is well, are they hovering around all of our nuclear power plants?
Oh, that's good. That's good info. Yeah, right.
And
right.
There's 55 of them. I have the street address and zip code for every one of them. And we run the report against them all, and no, they're not. Either the people in that town are not reporting them or they aren't hanging out there. Now, a conversation with Lou Alessandro a couple of years ago, we agreed, and again, we're both ex-military people who did analysis work, and basically told me wherever the advanced technology is, a.k.a. nuclear weapons. Yeah, they may haunt those bases, and they may haunt where the fleet hangs out, but they're not hanging around nuclear power plants, but they do hang around our toxic waste dumps.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the most interesting parts of the book. Toxic waste dumps.
Yeah, brownfields, strip mines, not every polluted lake, but heavily polluted lakes and rivers.
Now, what do you make of that? I mean, that they're interested in our destruction of the earth kind of a thing?
Yeah, well, if you go and look at the book Beyond UFOs, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation people there, the 4,400 people that they surveyed that were experiencers all came back and says, "Hey, those folks are great, and they told us to take care of our planet." you know,
Yeah.
so there seems to be a lot of concern about our waste areas. They follow the toxic areas. They follow the fault lines. They're really interested in our fault lines, and volcanic areas, and it's been known for a long time that if you have water, there's more UFO sightings there. Okay, and that is what we call an influencer. Not every place has huge bodies of water, but the places that do have huge bodies of water, it makes a difference. I'll give you an example. People, when we came out with our first desk reference, people said, well, wait a minute, how come Florida has more sightings than Texas? Texas has twice the population of Florida. And we pointed out that Florida has 1,200 miles of coastline, Texas has 400.
Yeah, so the implication is maybe that they live in or frequent bodies of water, that's where they hide, that's where they fly in and out of.
Well, yeah, and when you look at what's going on now in the government, they've been establishing these teams to look at the fact that these things can transition from coming in from space, coming through our atmosphere, and dive into the water, a multimedia type of craft. That is rattling a lot of people. The government, and as almost a career person myself in the military, I can see why. So
Yeah.
that's a big deal. That is a big deal. But a lot of people get very upset when they look at some of the influencer stuff, and they say to us, "Well, Cheryl, wait a minute. You're saying this is a lot about like human activity as much as the UFOs?" And I said, "Yeah." We took the position. There just seems to be a lot of UFOs up there. And I'll give you an example. Back when the December stuff came out from the New York Times back in 2017, they had that video, and you can still go out to that particular article at the New York Times and get that video. But you look at that video, don't look at the video, listen to what the pilots are saying, and one of them says, "Hey, I got that one, let's track that," and then suddenly you hear, wow, there's a whole fleet of them. Not a single major news organization, CNN, all of those people, they always cut it off before that part of the audio track came along.
Well,
They're
those
as much
are
part of the cover-up as anybody.
it's seagulls, right? Isn't that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah, seagulls, yeah.
You make a distinction. Let me go back to Nevada. So, thankfully, one of the first ones you put out was Nevada, my home state, which I really appreciated.
I did that for you.
All right. Well, good. I appreciate it. But you make the distinction that, I think Nevada ranks number 24. How much of that is a function of our population? And also, we don't have any coastline to speak of, but you make a distinction between Nevada and Arizona. There are other reasons why those two states might rank higher than their population might indicate.
Yeah, there is some differences. You do have your Area 51 up there, and it's not so much about the alien stuff there as much as they test a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And so you've got a lot of goofy stuff in the air out there, but you also have the desert environment, and that makes a big difference. I used to come out to Vegas twice a year. Linda used to own a fabric store, and we came out there for buying things, and we were always out there. How clear the sky is at night, even with the light pollution downtown. As soon as you get away from the downtown light pollution, you've got a pretty clear sky. So there's the desert areas seem to have a little bit better window on this stuff to be able to see it. What's interesting about Nevada is in 20 years they averaged about 2,200 a year. About 2,280 over the 20 years. About 114 a year. About 10 a month, and about 2 a week.
And you're able to break it down. For example, you factor into your numbers things like when the clubs let out, when a lot of people are outside, right?
Oh yeah. If you remember, I mentioned that 75-80% happens between sightings are reported between about 7 o'clock at night and about 11 o'clock at night. Okay, but and then it falls off pretty steep after midnight. But and then you see a bump at 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, some places you see a bump at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll get back to that in a minute. But in Clark County, or for that matter, in just in Nevada itself, but we narrowed it down to Clark County, there was a bump at 1, a bump at 2, and a bump at 4. And I sent that out to an investigator out there, and she came back to me and said, well, that's when the clubs and the shows let out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to be outside. Okay, 1, hours of darkness and leisure time. You've got to be able to be outside. So how often? We found it in some of the southern states. The hot day for the sightings were like on Wednesday or Thursday. We didn't know why. And then some interns that were working for Linda looked at that and said, well, we're from down south. That's Bible study night. So, okay, people are out. They come back from Bible study. They're out in the parking lot. Hey, honey, look at that. That kind of thing. It's
Yeah, you
simple.
factor in things like when people are walking their dogs, when they're ending the night by going out, stepping outside to smoke a cigarette, the last cigarette of the night. That's when a lot of people see things in the sky.
Yeah, and the MUFON investigators will tell you. I've talked to MUFON investigators that have told me, literally, the guys who teach that kind of class have told me that they'll get a month's worth of sightings for their state, and they'll run a text file search on smoke or dog, on the idea that smoking dog walkers smokers and dog walkers are people who are outside. They're rather reliable. They know the lay of their local land. They know what's normal and what's not, that type of thing. And how many people have we ever heard about? They're out there walking the dog, and the dog got stiff and started growling, and there's the UFO. That type of thing. Many, many reports that I wrote stories about.
For Nevada, of course, the 2 biggest counties are also, they rank 1 and 2. The biggest in terms of population rank 1 and 2 in terms of the overall sightings. Not a surprise. But population isn't the only factor. As you look at beyond Nevada and other rural areas, I mean, the distribution of these cases and incidents is astounding, really. I think there's 100 and some counties that you found didn't have cases, but that's really a function.
105
right?
of about 3,135 counties in the United States, and that shifts a little bit because states sometimes combine them and sometimes generate a new one or whatever. But basically about 3,135 and about 105 did not report UFOs in 20 years. And we know which ones they are. They're mostly rural and they're mostly poor. That means they don't have broadband.
Right.
And that is also a driver. Let me give you the drivers real quick for your audience.
Sure. Yes.
Population, temperate weather. The weather patterns for us to see them up in northern states is different than what it is in a middle-level state, going like from about Maryland, going over that type of thing. And then leisure time, hours of darkness, and observer access to broadband. These were the major drivers. Now, the influencers, not every place has this. Proximity to water, proximity to toxic environments, proximity to geological faults, high media reports, and what we call the generational effect. And that kind of accounts for Los Angeles County and Maricopa County, Arizona, that are the number 1 and number 2 counties in the country for sightings. In fact, the number 1 zip code in the country is 85001. I'll say that again, 85001, and that is downtown Phoenix. And in 20 years, they had 1,374. The next closest county is only about 700. Okay, so something really special goes on in Maricopa County, but in downtown Phoenix. But even that number, I've had producers call me up and say, hey, we want to go someplace there's a hot spot where we can, set up the cameras and just sit there and wait for them, Even then, it's only 5 or 6 a month.
There's a distinction you make in the book, in the Nevada book that I read, about UFO versus IFO. And I recall Project Blue Book, which was trying to whitewash the whole thing, was still left with 701 unidentified, genuine UFOs. But the actual number, as you write, could be 3 times that much. Why is that?
Easily. Well, I don't know how to explain that. The numbers are huge. Okay, but we have to discount the fact that, and every news director I've ever talked to or editor will tell me, "Oh, you don't have all the credible observers. They don't
Huh.
trust everybody." But my argument to a lot of people is, somebody says, "Well, I don't believe they're out there." I said, "Well, I got 167,632 eyewitness accounts. And an eyewitness account can still get you convicted in any court in the country if you don't have CSI evidence."
Yeah, that's right. We're talking with Cheryl Costa about this amazing series of UFO books. Great idea for a Christmas present for the UFO aficionado in your family. Depending on where you live, the more than half of the state's issues are already out, 30 of them so far, and more on the way. Cheryl Costa, I thought one of the most interesting aspects of the work that you've done in this book series is the emphasis on exotic shapes and how you use that to sort of differentiate what might be legit, a legitimate mystery and unknown, and what isn't. Can you explain what shapes you included, and which ones are the most common?
Well, first thing for this state series, we did all the shapes were included. Okay, we took the whole raw number set. But when we talk about the exotic shapes, Linda made a big point. This is back when I was writing my column about 5 years ago. The shapes seem to be very telling, because there's a cycle about every 6 or 7 years. It goes up and goes down, and we've got a 60-year plot in the desk reference that shows they go up and down, up and down, up and down. And people have always asked us, well, why does it go down like that? I said, we really don't know, but Linda's conjecture, and the thing is, they've gone back to their home world or wherever to get the latest model vehicle. Now, back in the day, back in the 40s and 50s, it was all flying saucers. These days, it's all triangles or big spheres, that type of thing. So there's that. The exotic shapes tell you an awful lot about the diversity. Think about this. There's like 28 shapes out there, okay, that we know about. Some are variations. There's upwards of 80, but most of them are variations of these 28 shapes. And it's like when you look at a car, four wheels, windows, that type of thing. But you can tell the difference between an American car and an Italian car, or a Japanese car in most cases, okay? It seems to be the technology of the craft was designed by a different species of people. Is what it seems to be. And
Well, so many of the shapes that you reference that are cited in the books are not exactly aerodynamic. I mean, about the current controversy on flying pyramids. There's also these spheres inside cubes. If you're trying to do something that's what we would consider aerodynamic, a sphere in a cube is not it, right?
No, it's not, and that's the goofy thing. There's another one. You interviewed Dr. Valet about this a couple of years ago. He was talking about the shapes that appear to change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And there's two ways to look at that. Either it's a living ship with AI capability that can telepathically tell us it looks like something else, and goes, beams into our brain, because remember, our brain processes things. Our eyes perceive, the brain processes. So it's either telling us it looks like something else, or they've got a stealth technology that any country in this world would love to have. That's the key to it there.
Some people speculate they're living organisms, that they change shapes based on maybe not necessarily because of aerodynamics or something, but because for our benefit, as a display of some sort.
I've been of that opinion for some time. Again, it's a whole different topic for a different show, but
sure,
consciousness seems to be a major factor here too, because a lot of these ships, they seem to know when we're looking at them.
Right.
And I've read report after report. When we noticed it, suddenly it decided to dart off. But what's funny, though? In the last 20 years, people asked me when we wrote our first book back in 2017, they asked us, why didn't you go back 40 years? There's this perception that 40 years ago was the golden age of UFOs. And 1960 to 2000 added up to 15,150 sightings between both databases of reported sightings. I've got 15,000 with 2011, 2012, and 2013 each year. So if that was the golden age, baby, we are in the platinum age or diamond age. Now, 21st century, we have more sightings than the last 60 years.
I recall the last time you were here, we were talking about COVID and the effect of COVID, where a lot of people were at home. They're not working, they're not going to the office, they're at home with time on their hands. What was the overall effect of that, looking back now?
March and April were through the roof in 2020. Of course, we couldn't tell until we got into May, June timeframe when we could get the data. But March and April, during the primary lockdown, the numbers went through the roof. And the rest of the numbers for the year were uncharacteristic. It seemed to cycle with the what is it, Dr. Fauci and those other people talking about? Oh, different waves of infection,
right.
That type of thing. They seemed to fluctuate with that. It was intriguing to look at.
You mention in the book, there are obviously a lot of data. We've learned a lot. We do not learn, for example, where they're from. We don't know how they managed to get here. We don't know why they're here, what their goal is, what their interest is in us. So the big kind of questions. What do we learn from these numbers? What's the useful lesson that people take away from looking at all the data that you've crammed into these books? Broad strokes.
Broad stroke. They're
right.
Except for 105 counties, they're every place in the United States. And if you want to extrapolate that further, probably every place in the world. I get requests all the time from Europe, from Asia, from Canada, asking me, why haven't you crunched our numbers? And I told them I specialize in the USA, But there are people doing this work and trying to follow in our footsteps. So we'll see. But what we do need is, right now we've got 2 civilian reporting agencies. And it really would be nice if a major government agency took this seriously and began being that 800 number type of thing so that you could report this stuff. And it goes into a massive public database to really get the numbers. Because a lot of people didn't, when I wrote my column, a lot of people didn't know MUFON or NUFORC existed.
Right. Any chance of audio book versions of this? I mean, it's a lot of numbers to read, I suppose.
No. we toyed with that. We keep getting requests for electronic book. The tables and things like this don't translate well into the Kindle format. Oh, by the way, all these state books are available on Amazon. We've established a series. The series is called UFO Scholar State Statistics Series. That's the official series number. We got the official statistics, the official series number established with Amazon. The names of the book, they're all named the same thing, except UFOs in Ohio and where to find them, UFOs in Nevada and where to find them. It'll be UFOs in California and where to find them.
Can people order the books that are not yet published?
No. Right now, like I said, we've only got 30 up there, and it might be 35 by about noon tomorrow, East Coast time. It should be 35. And they can order those. They can order those ones, but we haven't published the other ones yet. We have a very, very tight quality control process, and we have to take, even though we're putting them out pretty fast, we have a very, very tight process for how we're doing things, and we follow process. We're former contractors, you do everything to process.
You make an interesting distinction about California. Of course, that's the big Megillah. It's number one in the total number of sightings. It's number one in population. But you break it down into, California can practically be 3 or 4 states in one, and so many different environments and so many different kinds of communities. Talk about California as as an example?
Well, 21,000 over the 20 years of 2001 to 2020. And it's funny, it's a little less in Northern California. But California has like three different, represents three, it's got all that coastline. It also has the temperate patterns up in the north, like you would have up in New England. It has the temperate patterns in the south, like you would have in Florida or Texas. And the middle part of the state around San Francisco is like going across the country from, Virginia and the Carolinas across to California. It represents everything. It is like 3 or 4 different states by itself. But a lot of people knee-jerk and say the population in California, that's the driver. Well, we did an experiment on the East Coast, similar coastal areas, similar land mass, and a similar size population. And actually, the pseudo California and the East Coast actually had more sightings than California did. Okay, so California is its own animal, and you can't compare it to any of the other states. You really can't. But a lot of goofy stuff goes on there. Los Angeles County is the hottest county in the country for UFO sightings. They've got more sightings than 39 individual states. Maricopa County, Arizona, Phoenix Lights, all that kind of thing, had more sightings than 36 individual states. So those are the two county hot spots in the country.
I thought you make an interesting point about media influence. That's the old chestnut, right? Is the people that don't want this to be true or to be taken seriously, they'll say, this is just really a reaction to media reports. It's like Kenneth Arnold's sighting happens, and suddenly there's reports all over the country about UFOs, and it's really a reaction to news stories as opposed to actual events. What's your take on that?
Okay, yeah, that was something I noted back when I read and saw the Ken Arnold stuff originally. Okay, and suddenly, if you're reading the New York Times back in that era, they're talking about, hey, they had them coming in, calling the Associated Press. They were being reported from 38 states, that type of thing. All right. And Blue Book even mentioned this. In fact, we got that idea from Blue Book, the idea of media reports. But what we've observed, and we were able to observe this with the National UFO Reporting Center. I'll give you an example. Indiana is a state that averages maybe about 2 sightings a week. Okay? In 2008, on April 16th, they had 25 in one day. Okay? It came to be called the Kokomo Lights. Now, if you watch the National UFO Reporting Center data after that first couple of days in local reporting, none of it bubbled up to the national wires, but it was all local reporting. And if you watch, there was a fallout period over the next 5 or 6 days and of sighting reports. But when we looked at the sighting reports, it was like there must have been an article in the paper that said, hey, people report these things to MUFON or New Fork, that type of thing. And it seemed to be retro reporting. It was just like, seemed to be this, maybe I should report that one I had 2 months ago or that one I had 2 years ago. And when people hear they have their place to report this stuff, they tend to go back and do these retro reporting type of things. That's what we discovered.
Huh.
There could be copycats in there, but this is what the data is showing us.
I know there was something in there about triangle shapes that you had to give some special consideration to triangles, worrying that there was, people are seeing something like the TR3B, which may or may not exist. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Every time I wrote an article about triangles, and I've seen one of the big ones. It's like a football field long, 2 stories to 3 stories deep. I've seen one of those, and it would take your breath away. And people tell me it's a TR3B, and I'm going, yeah. If we've got something, if that football field long, 2 or 3 stories deep thing is something we've got in development, as a taxpayer, I'd like to know more about it. That was my attitude on it. But there may be some. We just saw some kind of B-21 bomber. They just started showing us. It's awfully saucer shaped, if you know what I mean there.
Yeah.
But that idea of saucer shaped aircraft has been around since the 1940s. They were developing it. They found out that there were turbulent problems by having prop-driven engines on each side of the saucer. Okay, it made it a very unwieldy thing. I saw a documentary on the PBS a couple of years ago, and it only started seeing it again in development once they got jet engines that didn't cause the same kinds of turbulence. Okay, so there's still a lot of interesting technology we're playing with, especially in the stealth technology type of things. It's anybody's guess. We can make a lot of the chevron-shaped, triangular chevron-shaped type UFOs could easily be a B-1 bomber. Okay, it
Sure.
could easily be a B-1 or B-2 bomber.
Or now B-21, I guess maybe.
Or B-21, yeah. So it could be any of these things. There's a lot of stuff out there in development. I don't have an open door into those areas where they're developing this stuff. And no, I did not. I worked for Lockheed Martin for 32 years. I did not work at Skunk Works. Okay, I was an IT person for most of my career. Early in my career, I produced industrial films. So I've had people pestering me on Twitter saying, "Hey, when they pass this whistleblower thing there, are you going to come clean?" I said, "There's nothing for me to come clean about."
Oh, come on! You know what building they're stashed in.
That stuff. Pardon me?
You know what building they're stashed in, right? I'm kidding.
No, I
I'm stuck
don't.
about this.
I don't have a clue.
We'll try to take one quick call before we have to go to a break in about a minute or so. But I think Cornelius on the wild card line can ask something that you can answer in a minute. Hi, Cornelius.
Hey, George, I wanted to tell you, I tried to email you and stuff. I'm the one with the FBI and stuff like that. They falsely accused. But for your guest, I live here in Alexandria, Louisiana. We used to have England Air Force Base here. Then we got Barksdale in Shreveport, and we got Fort Polk in Leesville, Louisiana. So have anybody made any sightings from these different military bases? And also, George, I wanted to tell you.
Cornelius, we're going to a break here in 30 seconds, so I'm going to let Cheryl answer your question, and then you just hang on, and we'll get back to you. Cheryl?
I can't tell you about bases, but Louisiana over 20 years had about 1,400 sightings, and they average about 69 a year and about 5 a month down there.
We're going to go west of the Rockies. Neil in Pittsburgh, California. Hi, Neil. What's on your mind?
Hello, George. Hello, and thank you for a great show. And I had a couple questions for Cheryl.
Sure.
The first one is there a correlation between UFO sightings and Bigfoot sightings? And the second question is there a lot of sightings, seem to be a lot of sightings along the 39th parallel? And a big hello to Kanye Willis and Blue Rock Talkers.
All right. Hey, so Cheryl, you did look at, for example, the UFO highway, that 39th parallel story that's been around, and what did you find?
The book that came out in 2016 called it the UFO Superhighway, and in 2020 we put all the longitudes into our database, and basically there were 12 other latitudes in the United States that had far more sightings than that particular one.
Would you call them hotspots?
They went through heavily populated areas.
Right.
Okay, and they just happen to be into the bigger industrial areas. One of the problems with that superhighway one was we were working on the first book and we didn't have time to look at it, but our gut instinct was that that latitude was going through a lot of southern states. There wasn't a lot of stuff down there, and where it picked up all of its real serious numbers where when they went through a major city or something like this. You would think a UFO superhighway would have, consistent numbers going across the country. And we found that with some of the other latitudes.
Neil was asking about a coincidental connection to Bigfoot sightings. I know you don't look at Bigfoot sightings. I wonder if you've ever thought about putting a map of that kind of stuff over a UFO map and seeing if there's a connection.
The problem is okay. We have a little poster up here in the office here, and it says, "Just because you want a statistic doesn't mean it exists." The deal there is that we wanted to do it against livestock mutilations. Every state's got it.
Yeah.
Okay, not just the western states. But there was nobody had a consistent database of all of that. Same thing goes for Bigfoot sightings. I've gone to a couple of conferences where Bigfoot, Sasquatch type stuff was mentioned, and had several speakers. And I talked to the people who were there, had books, that type of thing, and they nobody had compiled such a thing. While there's tons of sighting reports out there, nobody had really compiled it. So there was nothing for me to put into the database to compare it to.
All right, Bigfoot folks who are listening, somebody get to work on this. The challenge has been issued. Neil, thanks for that call. We're going to go to the wildcard line. Bill in Los Angeles. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Hi, George and Cheryl. Hey, I understand from the History Channel that Catalina Island off the coast of L.A. here has been a hot spot for USOs, including recorded 911 calls to law enforcement. Cheryl, do your data distinguish between USOs and UFOs in Los Angeles County? And can you put to rest the debunker's stale claim that drones can account for what these craft do?
Okay. Okay. First thing for Catalina Island, there's a number of sighting reports that are in the database calling out Catalina Island. Okay, not a huge number, but it's been reported over the years. USOs, there are almost none of the database entries that we looked at called out USOs. I think there's maybe in all of the data we looked at, there's maybe 3 that reference the USO kind of environment. So, that's all there is. The data's not there. There's no way to do any work on it.
Yeah, that would be tough info to get. What about the other question on the drones? Can you differentiate there?
Okay. There's a couple of things on that. Some people could have misidentified, but we saw some news reports here a couple of months ago saying there was all Chinese drones.
Yeah, right.
Nah. I'm not buying that. Not okay. Hey, you're talking to an ex-sailor who been hundreds of miles out in the ocean, thousands of miles out in the ocean, and have somebody say, "Hey, we had 150 of these things floating around the ship." Where is the control capability for that? Okay, you have to look at that. Yeah, maybe they're sitting. Maybe a whole bunch of Chinese guys are sitting there, each one with their own little control box there, sitting on top of a submarine or something like that. Yeah, maybe. But I was in submarines. There's not an awful lot of room on top of a submarine for a lot of people to be standing around. So I discount that whole thing.
Oh, you don't think that there are super duper drones that can fly a couple of 100 miles out to ocean and just zip around? And, you could probably buy those at Walmart, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Right.
I was walking through the park about 2 weeks ago before it got really cold here, and we were walking along in the park, and all of a sudden we could hear this drone coming by, little drone. All of a sudden we heard it go, and it hit a tree and literally fell about 10 feet from us. So yeah, there's lots of drones out there, but the ones that have to go out there, the battery time on these things is less than 30 minutes in most cases. Unless they've made some big leap in battery technology, no, I don't think they can do that.
We're going to Norm in St. Louis, Missouri. Hi, Norm. You're on with Cheryl Costa.
Quick questions or comments. I live in St. Louis. I live by Lambert Airport most of my life, 63 years. But so I know where planes fly, 40,000 feet. But back, I want to say it was 2016. Me and my son were out all night from like midnight till 4 in the morning. It was a really big meteor shower, and they were coming like one every 30 seconds. It was the most I've ever seen in my life. But somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, going west to east, and I want to say like 3 or 4 times higher than where commercial planes go. And, you know, like we'd seen 100 commercial planes up in the air, and these were 3 or 4 times higher, but they were flying really erratic, like super fast, stop, go left, go right, stop, go. And they went west to east. And then my last comment would be, as far as I'm like what I would say an open-minded Christian, so that I think, this is my theory, is they're benevolent, whether they're angels or whatever you want to call them. Maybe Jesus has another planet somewhere with people, but I don't know. But I'm just saying, I think God sends them to intervene when man's ready to self-destruct.
That's an interesting thought. I don't think there's anything in UFO data that conflicts with religious beliefs, Christian beliefs at all. Cheryl, you want to tackle that question and his reference about the 2016 meteor shower?
Okay. I can't talk about the meteor shower. I don't have any data on that. I don't follow that much. As far as the religious beliefs, I have talked to. I'm technically clergy myself. I'm a Buddhist clergy. And I've talked to many Christian clergy who have told me that they have had former fighter pilots and things like this come in and confess under the seal of confession these things that they chased when they were fighter pilots that they couldn't catch. So most people that I talk to believe that. What is the statement? My Father's house has many rooms.
Yeah.
The universe is a big place, and if God created it as we think, then the universe is permeated with life.
Well put. Thanks for the call, Norm. First-time caller, Joe in Texas. Welcome to Coast, Joe. You're on with Cheryl Costa.
Hey, I just wanted to kind of give you a UFO story that I had since I was a kid. It was 1998. I was playing outside of my grandmother's house. It was a cul-de-sac. It was me, my sister, and a friend of ours were all out playing. It was late afternoon. And out of these woods at the end of the cul-de-sac comes flying this UFO. Now, the UFO was 5-sided triangle. So it had flat sides, but it was a triangle shape. And it freaked out my sister and my buddy so bad they ran back to my grandmother's house, started beating on the door, and had them be let in. Now, mind you, George, I'm only about 100 yards from this thing, and I'm looking up at it, and I'm amazed. My grandmother comes to the door, and she's like, Joey, come back. That's just a helicopter. Well, it was no helicopter because as it was flying, it came to a stop. And for about 30 to 45 seconds, I'm looking at this thing. It's got white lights like a string of pearls on the side and an undulating type opal green color sphere on the bottom. And it just burned into my memory. And after about 30 seconds, it just takes off with no sound. It was just kind of crazy. I just kind of wanted to share that with you guys.
Yeah, helicopter with no sound. Cheryl, thanks for sharing the story, Joe. Cheryl, I didn't see audio info. Do you get that typically in UFO reports that come your way?
In the data, if you look at the databases that raw from MUFON or raw from National UFO Reporting Center, yeah, you do see those. I saw that a lot when I was writing my column. Different people heard a buzzing sound or something that sounded like the kind of sound you used to get on a landline phone when you picked it up and there was a dial tone. That kind of a sound I've heard it described that way.
Thanks for the call. Let's go to Carl in the Bronx on the wild card line. Hey, Carl. Good morning. You're on with Cheryl Costa.
Good morning, George and Cheryl. Thank you for taking my call. I'm very happy that I've been on your show many times, and I have a very critical question. Cheryl has to dedicate a book to the contactees, to the alien races that are coming here. We must find out from the contactees whether, if Russia launches tactical nuclear weapons, will the alien races intervene? They can render these weapons useless. They've been over all our bases, and they can turn off all our weapons to useless weapons. They must intervene, because if they don't intervene, the dead, the living will be jealous of the dead. We must find out. He must get in touch with all the contactees.
I'll tell you what, Carl, I'm not sure that would be a tough nut to crack there in trying to figure that out from statistics on UFO sightings. Interesting point, but Cheryl, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I can talk to that. I was actually approached by Steve Bassett. He's our one of our major lobbyists down in D.C., and he approached me a few years ago after the first book came out, and he asked me if we could do the same thing, gathering the data and working the statistics for experiences. The problem was that there was nobody been keeping a database. Okay. And one of the things we did try to do is we tried to reach out to Whitley Strieber, because him and his wife after communion got upwards. The high number was upwards of 200,000 letters from experiencers.
Right.
And that would have been very nice. Unfortunately, that data is all now archived at Rice University. And unless somebody gave me a good grant to go do this, there's no way. I'd love to go to that archive. Not that I want to out anybody, just get like dates, times when people say they saw things. I'd love to go do that, but I would need a grant. As it is, all of our data books and our desk references and all this whole series of books we're doing was financed by the pensions of two old ladies.
Oh. Well, maybe we could talk Jeff Krypal into assigning grad students to do that work, and you could help them. But thanks to all our callers. I wanted to ask you one other question before we go, Cheryl. I saw something, I think it was on social media this past week, that you had written about a column, the only column you ever wrote for that paper that you worked for as a columnist, the only one that was ever spiked. What was that? What was it?
Okay, it was in 2016. And I wrote an article. Understand, I'd been writing a column for 3 years at that point. And the article was, "What will disclosure look like?" And I described this, if we get to have our government leadership come out and say, the president and the vice president come on TV, they got the Joint Chiefs with them, they got the leaders of the two houses of Congress, and they say, hey, we've been in touch with a spacefaring race, that's real, And then the rest of the article, I says, how will that change us? Think about it from an anthropologist's viewpoint. It's going suddenly these off-worlders, if they're introduced to any of them, are going to be the darlings. They're going to be on Good Morning America and all these sorts of things. We're going to have reconciliation meetings with Travis Walton and Whitley Strieber on national television, all saying, "Hey, no hard feelings," all that kind of stuff. And I wrapped up it's got really snarky. It's going to affect our fashions, all this stuff. And then the last thing I put on there was the late night was the script for a late night ambulance chasing lawyer saying, due to recent treaties with the Galactic Federation, if you previously lost a job due to reporting a UFO, had livestock mutilations, or lost your pilot's license, and like that, call our firm. You're going to be due for a financial compensation.
Yeah, this could be bigger than Camp Lejeune. The lawsuits. Anyway, exactly. Cheryl Costa, congratulations to you and Linda on this terrific project. Best of luck. We have links on our Coast to Coast website if people want more information, and I hope you sell 1 million of these things.
We hope so too. The reason they spiked it, They felt I had established such gravitas with the column for 3 years. They thought it was below me.
Oh, supposed to have a sense of humor about this stuff. Thanks again, Cheryl. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
George. Bye-bye now.
Right.
The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.